Penn State is rolling along as they always do as the best team in college wrestling. Iowa, though, they are not where they're supposed to be, and this could get ugly.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is right. It is a Locked On crossover to talk Penn State and Iowa wrestling. Also, Matt Campbell's move from Iowa State over to Penn State. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State. He is Trent Condon, host of Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily source for all things Iowa. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com to get your college football playoff profit boost every game day. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about Matt Campbell. Trent's going to lead that segment because there is some vested interest with him being from Iowa State. The folks at Iowa want to know, how's this going to go? How's this going to look? We'll talk about that later in the show. We're going to preview the lineups in depth between Penn State and Iowa, but we got to begin here, Trent. The impression that I get from you before we even hit record here is that this is going to be bad. Penn State is consistent, right? We know that they're the number one team in the nation, but hey, the change that Iowa made, but then slowly it's just kind of falling apart left and right. You have Massoma and Endene, who just abruptly leaves the team. We'll get your thoughts on that too in this segment, but Nasir Bailey's not wrestling up to the standard that was expected. Yes, Angelo Ferrari's consistent, but then somebody like Drake Ayala has kind of fallen off here. Dean Peterson not necessarily wrestling up to the standard here. What is going on with Iowa wrestling? They are not even close to Penn State. I would say they're further away from Penn State in the past 5 years than ever.
Yeah, it's crazy because they went out and spent in the portal, looked like there were some nice additions, and then it's just more kind of the same, where one step forward and two steps back out of this wrestling program under the brands. And it's as down as I've been in quite a while with Iowa wrestling. I mean, you might have to go back to the end of the Zaleski era since the last time that I've been down on this program and where they are. It's coupled with Iowa's struggles, yes, but just what Penn State continues to do year in and year out, and the domination that we've seen out of them in this sport. And for many Iowa wrestling fans, it's unacceptable to be at this point, to be an also-ran. And now you take Endene out of that lineup, you're not even talking about a team that likely is going to finish in the top 5 at NCAAs this year, something that is unthinkable. At minimum, they're going to be there. And even that is usually a frustration, finishing 4th or 5th in the NCAA tournament. But it looks like that might be a difficult path. A lot of guys that you'd anticipate at minimum are going to be All-Americans, certainly are not wrestling up to that standard. Guys that you're hoping that were going to be All-Americans can't get close to that level. National championship contenders coming into the year, Drake Ayala, definitely one of them. He has wrestled very poorly this year for his standards. So there's been a lot of frustration there and the growing discontent with the wrestling fan base. And what do? Because the easiest thing, well, of course, you move on from your coach, you go a different direction. Who makes sense? And that has been something, Zach, I think we've talked about the last couple of years when we've talked about it, is if Iowa makes the move, there isn't that home run to hire. There isn't the easy guy to go. I know there's a lot of people look at what Doug Schwab has done, former Iowa national champion, and a guy that played high school baseball with me. So, but Doug up at UNI has done a really nice job with Northern Iowa. Still, you're talking about completely different expectations and circumstances of what you have to do. So it's that growing kind of frustration of what's happening in the program, what's happening with Penn State. And I just have this sneaking suspicion, and we'll get our predictions and kind of break things down. We might look at something historic, and Friday night very well could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like if this turns really embarrassing, where it is a blowout of epic proportions, that is enough, where at minimum, the wheels start to get in motion a little bit for Iowa's athletic director, Beth Getz, and looking at it and saying, we do have to make a move. This is unacceptable for Iowa wrestling, and we do have to see what's out there. Not that they're going to fire brands in the middle of the season. That's not what I'm saying at all. But we know how backgrounds work, and you certainly know it at Penn State, what happened with the football program this year. That needs to start happening. We'll see if Friday night leads to that.
And on paper, Iowa, I've seen so many different opinions on social media, because when you look at this group on paper, okay, Dean Peterson, Drake Ayala, Nasir Bailey, Ryder Block is somebody that I think his better wrestling is ahead for him. How soon can he turn the corner? You know, bring in Jordan Williams alongside Nasir Bailey. You still have Mikey Caliendo, Patrick Kennedy, of course, Angelo Ferrari. You lose Endene in the moment. Ben Kueter in and out of the lineup due to injuries, right, and circumstances, and he was back against Wisconsin. I mean, Trent, the Wisconsin dual meet for Iowa was concerning, but this wasn't that lineup that was at full strength. It's full strength. I mentioned some of the guys that are just kind of wrestling below the threshold here. So Penn State will very, very much take advantage of that. If that's the case, I want to get your thoughts briefly on Endene, and I'm not looking for inside information. Mm-hmm. It's about perspective. To lose somebody that was an anchor and people were saying, hey, this guy's going to challenge Josh Barr at 97 at a very minimum. He could find his way into the finals. And then, you know, as the season progressed, I said, you know what? Some people might be right about Endene being a finalist caliber type of wrestler. And then just all of a sudden he's out of the lineup here. And there's not a lot of context, which means that it was ugly behind the scenes itself. So your take on Endene just leaving Iowa abruptly like this?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of rumors and rumblings out there about what this is, questions about NIL, other things that are out there. And that's all speculation. We're going to stay away from that part. Yes. One thing we do know, he became a recent father, and his kid was just born here recently. It could have something to do with that. But that aside, you know, it's frustrating because this was a guy that I just enjoyed so much. You know, wrestling at the Division III level at one of the power programs at D3 at Wartburg, hearing his story of what he came from in Texas, what he was able to do up in Waverly and in that program, the national champions that he won. And he was fun to watch. You know, he was a guy that was entertaining. He was one of the bright spots, certainly going back to national duels at the beginning of the season. He was one of the bright spots that came out of that, clinched the win in the semifinals. It was so many good feelings about this guy. Easy to root for, a lot of fun, a different kind of story than we're used to. I know there were certainly a lot of people with opinions. Can he make that transition from D3 up to the D1 level? At minimum, he was able to do that. Looked like he was on his path to an All-American, potentially maybe a path to even get to a championship match. I mean, that was all in front of him, and now it's aside. And then on top of it, you got Tom Brands and the way that, you know, he talked about this, and he just said that Endene is no longer with the roster. That's all he said, and didn't want to elaborate anymore. So that leads to even more speculation.
That's why it's suspicious, right? Because there were no answers.
Right. And that's Brands a little bit. Like, you never know what you're going to get with him in a press conference. It could be wild. It's always wild, right? It's always crazy what you're going to get. You don't know what kind of answer you're going to get, but he said he had an announcement. He gave the announcement. He was asked to follow up, didn't want to elaborate any further, and that leads to what we are right here. But it's another one of those dominoes that falls for Iowa and the growing discontent with this fan base. I know there are Brands truthers that no matter what he does, it's not going to matter. Tom Brands needs to be running this program. There are other people, though, that are ready for a change. And I think this is just another piece of ammunition for them, and the development of the program, the guys that they bring in. You know, recruiting at minimum's been good. And you can argue certainly very good, but then you see what Jax Forrest does in his first meet. You just left shaking your head. What could have been?
Iowa is 8-2 overall. Based on this discourse, honestly, you wouldn't know it, but that's the expectations of Iowa, is that there shouldn't be a gap. Oklahoma State, Ohio State, whomever, Iowa State, right? They lost the Cyhawk duel. That's why this discourse is happening around Iowa wrestling, and Penn State could be a hypothetical nail in the coffin here. Well, the last time that Penn State wrestling even lost a dual meet was at Carver-Hawkeye. It was in January of 2020. So I imagine that Penn State isn't going to take this one lightly or this one for granted, especially since it is the Iowa Hawkeyes. We're going to talk about the lineups and what to expect head-to-head, and the most intriguing matches, of course. Rocco Welsh, Angelo Ferrari. That one should be in the spotlight as a potential semifinals or finals matchup at NCAAs. We'll talk about it all next here on this Locked On Crossover. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The college football playoff is here, and FanDuel is giving all customers even more ways to get in on the action every single game day of the playoffs, because right now, every college football playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost waiting for them in the app. And here's why you're going to love it. You get the profit boost on the bets you already feel good about. So you can ride with the favorite when you think a team controls the matchup. You can take a shot on an underdog if you feel like an upset's coming, or you can build a parlay around the players and moments you think decide the game. Then you apply that profit boost and go after even bigger winnings. And when you win, FanDuel pays out instantly, which is perfect for playoff football. FanDuel is the best place to get into the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app to get your college football playoff profit boosts every single game day. And once again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions and Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen and watch every single day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcasting network out there. If you haven't already, go check out our all-new Everydayer Club. What is the Everydayer Club? You get more access to your favorite shows on the Locked On Podcast Network. If you sign up for the Everydayer Club for Locked On Nittany Lions or Locked On Hawkeyes, you get access to an ad-free audio feed for both these shows, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcasting app. You'll also get an invite to a members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of these shows. Go to the links down in the show notes to learn more and sign up for the all-new Everydayer Club. Let's just begin overall with the lineups and what Penn State and Iowa will roll out there Friday night in Carver-Hawkeye. Again, this one goes down 7 p.m. Eastern time. And then we're going to pivot to football too, to get Iowa fans will enjoy hearing how Matt Campbell's doing in Happy Valley, right? So for Penn State wrestling, Luke Lilledahl, Marcus Blaze, Braden Davis now in the lineup with Aaron Nagel. Presumably, it's not, Cale Sanderson at the time of this recording might confirm otherwise, but alluded to the fact that Nagel might need surgery, which means it's going to be Braden Davis for the long haul this season at 141, which might even be the better option at this point. Shane Van Ness at 49, PJ Duke, superstar freshman, Mitchell Messenbrink, Levi Haynes, Rocco Welsh, Josh Barr, and Cole Mirasola at heavyweight. Then for Iowa, there's going to be some either or decisions here for the Hawkeyes, which is why this could turn into a potential bloodbath.
Yeah.
Dean Peterson at 125. That is the expectation. Drake Ayala, Nasir Bailey, or Cale Peterson. That'll be interesting to see who they actually roll out there. Bailey is ranked. He's 9-5 this season. I would anticipate Bailey, but you never know. Ryder Block at 149, Jordan Williams, or Victor Voinovich the third. Mikey Caliendo, Patrick Kennedy, or Gabe Arnold. I thought Arnold might wrestle up at 97, but we'll get to that. Angelo Ferrari, the staple at 184. Harvey Luddington or Brody Sampson. Ben Kueter at heavyweight. I'm eager to see that Mirasola Ben Kueter matchup at heavyweight. So before we start to just kind of give our general break down those in-depth matchups, go head to head here. Trent, that lineup for Iowa, just kind of rehash it again. They're just not at their strongest right now.
No, they're not. And, Peterson is a nice kind of stopgap, right? He's going to fight to be an All-American. He's been completely fine. He's been kind of unanticipated at 25. But mentioned a little bit early, the frustrations of Ayala. He has not looked like close to the same guy.
He's 4-4. I never would have guessed.
Absolutely not. And once again, it happened against his opponent against Illinois. It looked like it sucked him out of it once again. The two guys from Arkansas, Little Rock, just have not been certainly at the level I think a lot of people anticipated with Bailey and Williams. Williams a touch better. Bailey's been a disappointment, looks like, and what we saw from him a couple years ago, I don't know if that guy is ever returning. It doesn't feel like an Iowa lineup. And though you got some obviously heavy heads, Ferrari at the top of that, Kennedy's a really good wrestler. It's just even the depth of this roster and the way that you go through and look at it. Mikey Caliendo is a fine wrestler, but in comparison to Messenbrink, we certainly know the way that has gone here historically. It doesn't even feel like what we're used to with an Iowa wrestling lineup. And even that we know here over the last decade has been a step behind for the most part, almost every single year Penn State. It feels like that gap, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, it just continues to grow and grow and grow.
It's the furthest in recent memory. I mean, since the last time that Iowa actually defeated Penn State, but even still, I mean, Iowa outperformed them in terms of the overall score. The one season where they did one, the last time Penn State didn't even win the NCAA title. It just feels like that's miles away right now from Iowa's perspective. And I think for the most part, Hawkeye fans would either be starting, you know what? I kind of agree with that too. Yeah, it is overblown, and Penn State's way ahead of where the Hawkeyes need to be. And it also, it's not even just about Penn State and Iowa. It's the fact that Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Ohio State have all wedged themselves in there And it's not just, hey, it's Penn State versus Iowa anymore. It's you got to compete with Oklahoma State. You got to compete with Ohio State. And Ohio State made that statement against Iowa at the collegiate duels. Don't need to go over that again because Penn State wasn't there, but different conversation, right, when we have more time. Okay, so the matchups are going to be, I'm more focused rather as opposed to the team score, the individual matchups. Lilledahl and Peterson could be, I think that's going to happen in NCAAs at some point. Blaze and Ayala, right? Davis gets a rematch with Bailey potentially. Okay, Shane Van Ness should probably have an easier matchup with someone like Ryder Block, who's just not there, just doesn't have the experience quite yet. PJ Duke against seed Jordan Williams. I think PJ Duke makes a statement here. Mitchell Messenbrink, Mikey Caliendo. How many times have these guys wrestled in the past few seasons? It's another leg on this race that Mitchell Messenbrink is just way ahead in. Patrick Kennedy or Gabe Arnold, one way or another. I think Levi Haynes just has so much separation in the 74 class right now. Angelo Ferrari, Rocco Welsh. That very well might be the NCAA final. It's a very minimum a semifinal. Kind of disappointed that we didn't get Josh Barr and Massoma and Endene, but circumstances aside here, Barr is going to be an overwhelming favorite, regardless if it's Ludington or Sampson. Again, Ludington promising, but not where Barr is presently. Kueter and Mirasola, though, good prove-it moment for Mirasola. Good moment to see, okay, is Kueter going to be able to stay healthy, remain in the lineup on a consistent basis? Trent, which matchup, aside from Ferrari and Welsh, and we'll break that down more so in a second because it is the headline matchup, in my opinion, which one are you intrigued by the most outside of that one?
I think it's at the top at 125. Lilledahl and Dean, they met a year ago. It was a 4-1 victory for Peterson when he was wrestling for Rutgers. So that's the one that I would kind of point to. And you're looking at a couple of those paths, maybe potentially for an upset. Get a couple. Again, I was not going to be able to do enough to win this duel. However, if you're looking to keep it closer than the experts think, in fact, speaking of those experts, our friends out in the desert, out at Circa Sports, already have the line out for this one. And in fact, before that, take a guess. What do you think the line is for this wrestling duel as Circa here in the state of Iowa has that up? What do you think the line is?
Since I think a shutout it's on the table. A shutout is definitely on the table here. I wouldn't pick that, but I'm saying it's a possibility. I got to imagine the spread is, okay, so 6 points. Probably Iowa might get 2 decisions or 3 decisions max. So something that's probably definitely over 20 points.
25. I was absolutely floored by that. And yet, if I was forced to make a wager right now, I'd lay it with Penn State, even at Carver-Hawkeye Arena, as crazy as that sounds. But yeah, I think at the top, that is probably my favorite duel. That potentially could be a little bit different, but you mentioned, I think all eyes are going to be at 84. Ferrari against Welsh, chance at a really, really fun matchup.
That is the matchup. And let's break it down a little more in depth before we pivot back to football here for segment 3. Ferrari, his style, controversial, right? To say the least. And I have no issue with it, but some people do. I've seen someone like Yanni Diakomahala say, wrestling from one knee, it's kind of bush league, right? That I'm very much a loose paraphrasing there, but he's kind of pointed it out publicly, and it's, well, who is he talking about? Who notably does this? That's kind of one of the faces of collegiate or freestyle wrestling. And it's Angelo Ferrari. So he's undefeated. He's very talented, right? We know this. Here's the concern that people have pointed out about Ferrari that I think Welsh is going to, in this head-to-head matchup, I think wins more often than not, is the difference in strength. I agree that Angelo Ferrari is not one of the strongest in terms of overall muscle and just physical strength. He is a finesse wrestler. He is a tactician. He is speedy. That's going to make a difference when you're really good at those things and a lot of other matchups. But against Rocco Welsh, who is just a hammer at 84, I think that's the kryptonite for Angelo Ferrari, whether it's Welsh or somebody else.
Fair. It absolutely is fair. And that might be Iowa's best chance at a victory in the duel. And yet you blow some holes in that one. Kueter probably be the other one. You mentioned that matchup at heavyweight against Mirasola. That should be another good one at minimum. And you just go through in some of these. And, at 97, it could be Gabe Arnold might bump his way up. Goes that direction. He's been sucking down a little bit. He's wrestled 97 2 different times this year. They go there. But against Josh Barr, Now, what's Gabe Arnold going to be able to do
Ugh,
in that kind of matchup? It
that's
just,
bad.
it feels like all these ones that even on paper could be potential toss-ups. And we've seen mess and break against Caliendo, and we know the way, obviously, the direction it has gone, culminating a year ago in the dual meet with the technical fall by mess and break in that one that I think opened a lot of people's eyes about that gap between those two guys. This thing, as we talked about, it could just get really, really ugly. And it's hard to come up with reasons, with real wrestling reasons, why some of these matches could go the Hawkeyes' way.
Best case scenario for Iowa, they win 3. They go with Peterson at 125 gets a win. I would say Angelo Ferrari at 184 gets a close win, and then Ben Kueter gets a win at heavyweight. Worst case scenario, it is a shutout. With the one that I am most skeptical of, or the one that I would give actually the most favor to Iowa, is Ben Kueter at heavyweight against Cole Mirasola. He's been doing this longer than him. It's a matter of experience, athleticism, that kind of thing. So if it's 9-1, don't be shocked, folks. If there is a shutout, unlikelier, but definitely on the table. Crazy that we're having that conversation. So let's deviate from that conversation, and Trent's going to lead the way here because Iowa fans have a vested interest because Matt Campbell from Iowa State, the Cyhawk rivalry, now over at Penn State. So it'll be exciting to see what the future holds both for Iowa and Penn State now that Matt Campbell is over in Happy Valley. That's coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover.
Back with you on this crossover edition. It's Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On Nittany Lions. Trent Condon, Zach Seyko with you. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes or Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every day. And if you want, you can join with us on our Everydayer Club, an opportunity for you to get all our episodes ad-free. All right, Zach, I want to jump over to football to wrap things up here. Wrestling, as you can tell, I'm kind of down in the dumps about things there. And it's just so incredibly frustrating what this program once was and where we are today. Iowa football continues to hum along, winning games. We saw a great game back this past October between the Hawkeyes and Nittany Lions. And though we're not going to see each other for the next couple of years unless it's in a Big Ten championship game, which might be on the table, we'll get to. I just want to get your perspective. We saw it from afar, obviously, with the rivalry against Iowa State throughout the years. Matt Campbell, what he built there. Just an overview of things from your guys' perspective. Saw all the Cyclone players that obviously followed him there, the work that they're doing in the portal, a very manageable schedule right away in 2026. Early returns for you guys and Matt Campbell.
Yeah, manageable to say the least on that schedule, right? I mean, that's every 7 of those games, teams were under 500 from 2025. So I'll digress from that. As far as the Matt Campbell situation, Penn State basically trips into a good situation, right? That was a 50-plus day coaching surge. Penn State was the laughing stock of because so many schools are making coaching changes, hirings were happening. Penn State tried to get out in front of it, and what was the point of all that? And then you kind of lucked into Matt Campbell in a way. Well, they called the wrong agent. That still kind of looks silly at the end of the day. So I will let it go because you end up with somebody that is at a minimum, I kind of want to take the nuanced objective look at this and not just be a total Penn State homer here. This is at a minimum a B hire. It is a B to B plus hire when you collect everyone's opinion. I think this is an A because of the circumstances. Okay. It could have been a lot worse when what I was hearing on the back end before they even got to Matt Campbell was that it's now Brian Daboll. Oh my goodness. You had Brian Daboll. And I said, I kind of tried to talk myself into it. Like, NFL guy and, the Giants are the Giants and it's still Brian Daboll. It's okay. I hope that he can develop QBs. Matt Campbell is a program builder. The idea is that you take his best aspects and then you merge them with the leverage and the war chest that Penn State has. Penn State, and that's, I hate that about college football because it's inorganic, right? You're talking about, well, Penn State's still going to be Penn State because they have all the financial resources at their disposal. So they're always going to be around. They're always going to be relevant. So that's part of the reason Penn State is as the institution. And then you take Matt Campbell and you give him those resources. You give him the leverage. So, well, you're just taking a middling Big 12 coach and dropping him in the Big 10. How's he going to succeed? He's going to succeed because he's never had this kind of leverage before. He's never had this kind of recruiting footprint, the brand. It is difficult to recruit to Iowa State. Okay. People say that about State College, Pennsylvania, but it's different though when Iowa State can't offer the same kind of NIL. You can't have the same kind of depth chart. So I imagine that Matt Campbell's going to succeed for the most part. Will there be some speed bumps along the way? Absolutely. But he's built out an incredible staff. He's brought over all the good players from Iowa State, guys who have promising futures and guys who can play right away. All conference caliber guys, whether that's Marcus Neal or Jeremiah Cooper, Benjamin Bramer. I think even Rocco Beck could find his way onto maybe a third team all conference in Big Ten play next season. And the difference for Matt Campbell is the reason those teams were 8-4, they struggled to get to 7-5 at times, they didn't have the depth. So if one or two players, key players like last season got hurt, then the team would basically fall apart. You don't have that issue anymore at Penn State. And it helps you with your longevity because then you can rest your starters. You have backups that are capable and aren't too far off from the starters. So long story short, Penn State lucked into this. Matt Campbell is a great hire because of the circumstances.
I want to send along to our Penn State people some of the maybe knocks that maybe you guys haven't heard because you're not close to the situation, right?
Go for it.
You see from afar. There's a couple of things, both me covering him in the media and then just the fan side of me too, that are a couple of things that I think might be interesting to your listeners. And I know some fans don't like to hear any of the negatives, but there's a couple there. First, it's going to be a lot of cliches. Be ready for this. It's going to be within the margins, a lot of football cliches.
James Franklin was Mr. Cliche. We know all about it too well.
You're going to get a lot of that. It's going to be a ton of coach speak. You're not going to get a ton of information. He was a guy that was incredibly close to the vest. I know the Big Ten has injury reports. Be ready for that to be, let's just say, manipulated a little bit.
Franklin did the same thing.
Yeah, famous example going back a couple of years, week after week after week. One of their best offensive linemen. He's week to week. We'll see. He never played. Didn't even play in the bowl game. This started in September. It culminated in January. We'll see. Week after week, he never played throughout the course of the season. So be prepared for that. And if you're somebody that likes to wager and likes to have that injury report, I'm probably not going to have the full slate of things. One final thing, and I do find this interesting, is Matt Campbell's sideline demeanor. On the sidelines, he is as animated. He is the football version of Fran McCaffrey. And I think any basketball fan certainly knows Fran's exploits on the sidelines and what he looked like in the past. He will lose his mind. He will absolutely freak out. There's an example in the Big 12 championship game a few years back against Oklahoma. He's losing his mind. You will see that often from Matt Campbell. Now, at Iowa State, because there's not a whole lot of national notoriety that goes along with it, I think it was kind of swept under the table, wasn't talked about a ton. And I think the same thing here. We see other football coaches that go there, but it is a rarity in comparison to what we see certainly in a sport like basketball, where the coaches are kind of the headline and what they're doing on the sideline, and you're seeing it all the time. But I do wonder, it's a wonder if we see that continue with Matt Campbell, if it gets a little bit more notoriety, if it gets talked about a little bit more, because it is different. It's different than most every football coach, certainly that I can remember in college football, the way that calls don't go his way. He'll dress down officials. He will lose his mind. There'll be some choice words. You'll see that. And if it becomes kind of a bigger narrative about Matt Campbell now, obviously with a bigger job at Penn State.
I think some Penn State fans will like that because James Franklin became stoic over the recent years, where he had that energy, he had that fire. It was the COVID season that really started to chip away at that energy. So whether it was the 2020 season, and I won't go all the way down that avenue, but just to put it in perspective, Penn State fans, that sounds good to me. That sounds good to probably a number of Penn State fans out there. Guy who's animated, high energy, some fire. James Franklin would get into it with the referees from time to time. Still, that was always consistent over his 12 years at Penn State. But somebody that's just a little more animated will be able to kind of boost morale because, okay, if this guy's going to be have a high motor and he's my head coach, and I'm going to run through a brick wall. And James Franklin, just every notable game that I can remember since 2023, arms crossed, standing on the sideline, no emotion, nothing. Even in the most high contentious games, you lose to Oregon, you're on the ropes against UCLA, and it's just he's looking up at the scoreboard and there's just no expression, no nothing, not getting in the huddle, not intervening. And that wasn't just subjected to 2025. That was 24 against Notre Dame. 2023, I don't have as much of a strong memory there, but all those, it seemed like for the most part that Franklin just didn't seem like he cared. I know he did, but he never expressed it. And I think that's an important component. And I'm glad that you reaffirmed that Matt Campbell certainly has that right now.
Yes. Yeah. It's one thing to be excitable, and I think Campbell takes it to another level. Just something to maybe put in your back pocket coming up for next season. Well, Zach, hopefully we see each other on the football field before 2028.
Playoffs.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe match up there. How incredible that would be to see that kind of matchup. It's been a great football rivalry. It's been a great wrestling rivalry. Certainly gone the way of the Nittany Lions lately on that front. Basketball, maybe a different story. We'll save that for another day. He's Zach Seyko. I'm Trent Condon, a crossover edition, Locked On Hawkeyes on my side and Locked On Nittany Lions for Zach. You can find us as well with our Everydayer Club. Make sure you check that out in the show notes. Find out how you can join us in a bunch of different ways, including going ad-free with our episodes. That'll do it for today. Thanks for being with us. No, Zach's got you covered. I'll be back with you with a rapid reaction podcast after the Iowa Penn State wrestling duel on Friday night. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you again soon.